The Birds That Fly Backwards is the story of my family, a memoir about a family. I grew up in the 1960s in Orange County, white bread community. My father was an ex-Marine who'd fought in the South Pacific on Guadalcanal, Peleliu, Okinawa, some of the bloodiest killing fields of the Second World War. My mother was a former American Airlines stewardess, and we were living the good life in suburbia in the post-war boom. Except it wasn't the utopia that the media kept telling us, because my father was haunted by the killings that he saw, the killings that he did. He had the violence and the torment inside him, and he brought it into our house. And we all had to work through the post-traumatic stress with him as a family. We all had to be part of that process, and it's an ugly, jagged, painful process. And the myths of the greatest generation upset me a great deal when that generation got mythologized, because it ignored the dark side. It ignored the price that those veterans had to pay for what they did, and what their families, in turn, the price they had to pay. So that's a big part of the first volume, the story of my father and me. Though we have 3 more volumes after this book that goes from my sister's point of view, another one takes my mother's point of view, another one brings the story to a climax. And why I think it's great to tell the story of a family, I think all families are microcosms of the society around them, of the times around them. And they act out the conflicts in the society. They are at war with the values of the society and what it means. And various family members take positions on that. And so you can understand a time and an era in a country, in the world, by just going into the living room of a family. And so that was my attempt, and I think it's universal. I think and then another part of it is the stories family members tell each other, and the mythologies they create to give meaning and shape and form and order to their chaotic and often violent and upsetting experiences. So the defining myth, we had many in our family, but the defining myth was of the birds that fly backwards. And that's a story that my grandfather, who I never met, Doc Weddle, told to my father in 1926 in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, steel mill town. And he said, "Jimmy, do you know about the birds that fly backwards? Do you know why they fly backwards? Because these birds need to see where they've been in order to know where they're going." And that became a defining story of our family. And that's the approach of this book. It's a memory play. It's a look back in anger and in love at the experience of a family and what it all means years later. And so the very last page of the book is a drawing by my granddaughter of the birds that fly backwards, because I brought her up with that story. And it's a story that was first told 100 years earlier in the city streets of McKeesport, Pennsylvania. And I think in this first volume, the focus primarily is me and my dad, because my dad was moody. He was struggling with his emotional equilibrium, and I became his confessor. I was the 10-year-old boy that wouldn't pass judgment on him. So we would watch war documentaries, and he would talk about his experiences in the war, and he would talk about the Japanese, which he saw them as monsters. He saw them as animals. And he would talk about them, the banzai charges, and then he would talk about the killing of them. But it was like he was trying to work through and make sense of what he experienced and the acts that he committed, because he committed murder. And he was not at peace with it. And he would scream at the television when some veterans talked about mutilating corpses and say, "That never happened," spit flying from his mouth, which indicates an intense emotional, well, it was an intense emotional response. So when my parents left to go out, I went into the closet in the garage I knew where the key was to this locked cabinet, and went through all my dad's stuff and found pictures of him. Starting out, he looks like a fraternity boy on summer break, having fun on the beach in Guadalcanal. But then come the pictures of the battlefields and the dead Japanese, And then I found a picture of my father holding a severed Japanese head in his hand, something he said never happened. That violence affected me, and I acted it out in various ways throughout my childhood. In 1969, we went down to Laguna Beach to go see a movie because movies were very important in my family. Movies were how we understood and made sense of our lives. Movies mythologize the American experience, and we internalize that, and we look to movies almost like going to church. So my dad took me, my sister, and my mom went to see Julie Andrews in Thoroughly Modern Millie, and my dad took me to see Sam Peckinpah's masterpiece, The Wild Bunch. And the opening scene are kids torturing scorpions and ants on an anthill. And then which is something that I did as a kid, and I write about it in the book. And it's an expression of anger from a violent society, in this case my dad, and I'm acting that violence out. And I'm watching the movie, sitting beside my father, and it's like the movie's looking inside me. I'm not watching the movie, it's looking at me. It's seeing things in me that I didn't want anybody to know about. And then came the massacre in the town, which was like the massacres happening in Vietnam at the moment. My dad grabbed my arm, I had marks on my arm afterwards. And he was like, Jesus. And then Robert Ryan wanders through the aftermath of the massacre, and he's weighted down while the bounty hunters he's with are gleeful and stripping the bodies. And my dad said, see, they can live with it. He can't. And it's as if my dad was talking about himself as Robert Ryan. And there were many moments like that with my dad. Tight-lipped confessions in the dark of a movie theater that would never come out in the light of day. And I was his vessel for confessing those things. So as the Vietnam War accelerated, the battle between in family members and my brother, a half brother who showed up, who was a hippie from Woodstock, got in a fight over the flag and the meaning of the flag and why do people put flags on their clothes, which was really unusual in those days. My dad throwing my brother against the wall and saying, I saw people die for that flag. And my brother said, I have friends dying for that flag right now, that flag of yours. I was terrified. I was petrified that my brother stood up to my dad. I ended up going to USC Film School. My father scraped the money together for me to go. And so this is the other side of my father, is I wouldn't be sitting here right now talking to this camera. I wouldn't have had the career I had without my dad. He loved movies. I grew up watching movies with him. He would quiz me on all the character actors. So he not only took me to Wild, but he took me to many films. And then I started writing stories and making Super 8 movies, at 12. And I took all of my stories to my father. My mother was not interested in them, and I love my mother very much, but she just did not see that as a serious thing to pursue. My father would read them in detail. He would comment on them. He sacrificed everything for me to go to USC Film School. But he also hit me when I was a kid, and hit me till I peed on his leg, and then hit me for doing that. So I had these two sides of my father that were very difficult to reconcile. I get to USC Film School and I get into therapy, and therapists get me to reenact some of the memories from my childhood where my father hit me. And I started hitting myself in the moment, and they had to hold me down. And I was yelling what a piece of shit and an asshole I was to myself. And the therapist said, put the blame where it belongs for once, meaning my dad. And I stopped crying. And I went home that Thanksgiving, and the My Lai massacre came up, which my father was seeking to defend because he was trying to defend himself and things he did that he couldn't face, that he couldn't come to terms with. And I challenged him. I challenged all of his facts. And he pivoted to me and said, you're about to go through the roof. And I stood up and said, you beat the shit out of me when I was a kid. You want to beat the shit out of me now? You're fucked. He went white. He walked back into his bedroom and shut the door. Everybody at the dinner table was flabbergasted. I stayed that night. I was going to leave to go home. I get up and he's sitting in the living room with a file. And it was a psychiatrist report on him when he was an executive, auditioning to be an executive for Hunt Foods. And he said, maybe this will explain to you why I am the way I am. I don't know. Maybe this will help. It did not. But the fact that he wanted, that he did that he didn't sleep all night, that he went out to that cabinet with all the dark stuff and got this report and gave it to me. It didn't make everything okay with us. I didn't talk to him a lot. My sister came to see me at USC, and Dad's really upset. You two used to be pals, and now he doesn't know what's happened. And the day I graduated from USC Film School, which he and my mom made possible, I'm in flip-flops under my gown. I'm like, US, this bullshit. USC trying to raise more money. And my mom said to me, do you realize we never graduated from college? And we made this possible for you, so you understand. But it doesn't mean anything to you and me. It means something to us. And my dad didn't say anything. He was sitting on the couch, like listlessly kind of leaned over. And he bought me a new car, a Ford Fiesta, which I didn't want because I had a Mustang that I paid for half of it myself. And I loved my Mustang, but I had to act like I liked the new car. But he saw that I didn't like it. So I went in and changed my shoes and put on real dress shoes and came out. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go. My dad was like sort of sagged over on the couch. And I said, Dad, what's going on? And he started crying. And he said in this strangled, almost little boy voice, like my voice when I was a kid, and I looked up to him and said, I love you. And I went, and in that moment, my heart melted and I rubbed the back of his head. I said, it's going to be okay. Suddenly, I'm the parent. I'm saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Let's go. And that's what this book's about. Like, we live in an age where everybody wants to pass judgment on everybody. And everybody wants to say, and I'm talking about all through the political spectrum, you step out of line with our ideology, you should be canceled. And that's on the right, the left, that's everywhere. We have no tolerance for the flaws in human beings, because we're all terribly flawed and we all make mistakes. We all hurt the people we love. And so this book is a sort of a plea for understanding that people are struggling and doing the best they can, and that we have to find ways to love each other and not pass judgment on each other. And that's what the book's about. And I hope you'll read it.